We are back in session. Mr. Wood, I think.
Okay. We had just finished up on fleet management, I think, when we left.
Yes, sir.
So the next one is the law enforcement separation allowance. And what I'd like to do there is just read that top thing because it explains it perfectly what this is the North Carolina General Statute 143, 166.42 requires the county to pay annually a special separation allowance to retiring law enforcement officers. This fund covers the revenues and expenditures to provide that allowance. And the formula for this annual payment is the last salary multiplied by 0.85% multiplied by the number of years of creditable service. This special separation allowance is payable to all officers who, number one, have completed 30 or more years of creditable service or have attained the age of 55 with 5 or more years of creditable service, have not attained age 62, and number 3, have completed at least 5 years of continuous service as a law enforcement officer immediately before service retirement. What this basically says is that if these law enforcement officers want to retire early, you're basically giving them their the equivalent of their retirement system pay for up to 7 years. And at age 62, it stops, and that's because they can go on Social Security and they get everything they're supposed to get. So, is everybody clear on that?
As much.
Well,
So in other words, if I'm making $50,000 a year and I get 0.85% of that 50,000 times 30 years, that would be the total amount in the fund to pay to the.
yeah, that's what you would
You
pay
don't pay
that
it as a
officer.
lump sum.
No, you pay
Fund
him
it every year.
You fund it every year between age 55, but it stops at 62 or his death.
We're required to do an actuarial study on it that tells us how much we have to fund it every year.
And see,
Based upon that gross amount. So if that amount is $385,000 and they've got 5 years, you divide it by 5, basically they get that amount per year?
well, they get the amount you just did, the formula you just used, they get that amount annually. Okay,
All right,
So-
but that's North Carolina law.
that's
Yeah,
North
but
Carolina
that's
law.
not
That's
changeable, so
that's
we
why I
move
gave
on.
you, well, that's why I gave you the statute, is this is not optional.
Okay.
And they
Uh,
get,
But I
they
did,
get
that last paragraph I wanted to read to you, the benefit ceases upon the death of the officer, the last day of the month in which the officer attains 62 years of age, or the first day of reemployment by a local government employer in any capacity that requires participation in the North Carolina Local Government Employees Retirement System. So basically, if he stays retired, we do this till he turns 62, because at that point, you can get Social Security and you can get retirement. The retirement system still considers 62 early retirement, but it wouldn't dock you like it would at 55. That would be a tremendous loss in your retirement system.
Well, what, I know, and I'm certainly not a tax or a tax specialist by no means, but Social Security has changed. I mean, like when I turned 60, I had to be 62 in 9 months before I could, and I understand that it's gradually easing up.
It is.
I mean,
Yes,
but
I
this
had to be
says
66.
Yeah, right. I
They
mean, it
just-
says 60, but they're still going with the 62.
They just haven't caught up with this yet. Somebody will put in a bill to amend it,
Okay,
is my
I
guess.
shouldn't have said anything.
No, that's my take on it,
Okay,
Wayne. I
all
agree
right.
with you, because I know like with mine, I have to be, I think, 63, and he'll have to be,
70.
yeah. And I mean 63 for early. I'm
Yeah.
at 66 for regular.
Yeah.
And you'll be 70?
70 for regular.
Yeah.
So there is an advantage in being old.
No, there ain't.
Yeah, enjoy your
Move
move.
on.
Okay.
What it is.
All right, and to give you some idea of the cost, let's go to the spreadsheets, because I want y'all to see it's,
Well, they ain't nothing we can do about it.
no, but it's roughly $121,000, okay? And what we're doing is, benefits payments for this coming year, and the appropriation for separation allowance is there. So again, it's about $121,000.
So you came up with that figure based upon the number of people that you know we have that
Yes.
fit that category?
That's
Yeah.
an actuarial figure.
It's an actuarial service that we have to have done by law.
Okay,
They tell us exactly what we have to appropriate.
And remember, it's only for the sheriff's deputies. You have to be a sworn law enforcement officer.
Pam, that's gas be 45,
Huh?
gas be 45. Can't remember.
Yeah, maybe.
But Pam, I guess what I was asking was, you came up with 121,469 based upon certain people we have, or that's just
We have to
it's just
send the
a
information.
minimum amount?
No, we have to send the information off. We send it off to a company called Kavanaugh, that we tell we send all our list of employees that meet this.
That's what I
Sheriff's
meant.
Department. They
That's
figure
what I meant.
exactly how much, and so they aren't telling you exactly what you're gonna draw out this year, but they're also telling you you've got to fund for future. So they're looking at your retirement ages of all your officers,
Okay.
and that's the amount we have to put in.
And you can see we're using some appropriation, so, as you build up a fund balance. Okay, the next thing is a category on capital projects ordinances information. And I overlooked this in last year's budget, but we're supposed to have information on each one of our capital improvements projects or capital projects ordinances. So right there in that one page, that's all that's in there. I've given you an update on each one of them. And I don't know if y'all want me to go through them. It's the 2 middle schools is one. The schools renovation capital projects ordinance is the 12.3 million they're using on the 5 or 6 schools. The satellite jail capital projects ordinance is the 10 million project there. And the fourth one you just set up, and that's the Wayne Regional Agricultural Convention Center capital projects ordinance. So those are the 4 that we have.
Have they let out for bids for that satellite jail project?
They're in the process of doing that, yes, so we should get them back shortly.
Okay.
And that is all the funds in the budget in the appendix. I would like to go over a couple of things with you on these debt service schedules. The first thing I want to go over with you is very good news. You see the county's debt, and we are including the $1,776,032. That is the proposed financing to cover this budget. Some of the equipment we talked about financing. So that's already built into the budget, and that's the debt service schedule to pay for that. And again, that's only going out 59 months, so it'll end in 5 years, okay? The others that we already have will end in 4 years. So in 4 years, this debt is gonna come down by $1,099,000. Everybody see that? And then at the end of the 5th year, it'll come down by an additional $361,000. So this really is short-term debt, or medium-range debt, because none of it goes out past 5 years. So the good news there is that, again, you're budgeting for 16, 3 more budget years after that, $1.1 million is freed up for additional debt service. Now, it gets better. If you go to the Board of Education, no, I'm sorry, that was, hang on just a minute.
Before you go
Yeah,
there,
that
can I
was
ask
it.
you something on this page here?
Yeah.
You got $9,493,000, which is an installment financing at 1.63 of fixed rate. What is that? What is that $9.5 million for? The existing debt that we have?
It was a refunding on the board and building and part of the radio system. We refunded, refinanced it,
Okay.
so that's
It
what
was
we
on the
did.
board and building.
Board and building, and it's a combination of 2
And
debts.
that's really all the debt that we have, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes, sir, unless we take on this equipment debt.
That'll be next year.
And then we're still responsible for some of the schools'
Oh,
debt,
sure,
but we don't count that as, we've titled this as non-school county debt. If you'll see the label at the top.
Yeah, but that That's kind of unheard of, isn't it?
Well, it's extremely low.
It's extremely low. Wow, okay.
Very low.
Kind of toot our horn a little bit
No,
here.
absolutely.
Because there are a lot of counties that are sitting there with a huge debt.
Tens of millions of dollars in debt.
Hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
so
we're
this,
sitting here
no, this
with
is extremely good.
$10 million.
And the same thing frankly with the school system. I mean, it's not unheard of to have over $100 million in school debt in a county this size. And you don't have that.
Very true.
That doesn't mean we want to go out and do it, but you don't. But,
I wasn't going in that direction.
I know you weren't. That was said for the benefit of people who might be listening. One of the things I wanted to explain, so going back to this non-school county debt, if you look at the total expenditures that we have now before we finance this, you'll see that we're at $1,489,000, and within 4 more years after this current budget, that'll go to zero. So that's freeing up nearly $1.5 million. Everybody see that? If you skip the school debt, which is the next page for a minute, and go to the economic development purposes, the eastern region, if you remember, that's 5 years or 59 months. At the end of 4 more years, this budget we're getting ready to do plus 3 more, that $613,838 comes off. So between those, you're gonna have $2.1 million freed up in about 3 to 4 years. So as we're looking at what to do with the DSS, public health, these probation offices and everything, this is going to free up room for us to debt finance those projects. So I just wanted you to know, that's the big picture. And that's a great situation to be in, because all of that debt is coming off pretty quickly. And that was the major takeaway on that. Now, back to the schools, you'll see that what we have is the 2012 QSCAB, and that goes on until 2026. Then you have the 2014 school promissory note. That's the big one, and that's the one we're having the big amount on this year, okay? So that's $4.9 million per year. But as you see, that's gonna stay pretty constant for a number of years, really until the QSCABs come off in 26. So from our standpoint, as far as freeing up any room for additional school debt, there won't be, for probably another 10 or 11 years on that. So that's the reason we like to have these debt service schedules, because when you start looking at long-term planning for capital improvements, you're able to see what we've got there. So is everybody good on all of that? And the last thing in the budget is just a glossary of terms. I know we use a lot of different terms that may be different for everybody, so this is kind of a glossary that if you hit something you're not sure about, you might check back there. And that's pretty much the budget. What I'd like to do now is cover the CIP.
Excuse me, let me go back to this QSCAB.
Okay.
Are we reimbursed anything from the federal government on that?
We are, the $1,071,000, you'll see the principal, the principal's the same every year. That $1,071,000 is because of the qualified school construction bonds. The schools had pledged their lottery funds to pay back the principal. So the first amount that we take from the lottery funds is the $1,071,428. So that supports they get about a little over between $1.3 and $1.4 million a year in lottery funds.
Okay.
We've applied that first, and we take the balance of that and we apply it to their other debt that we just took on for the 2 middle schools.
Right.
That takes up the total lottery. The difference in that is the amount of sales tax we apply to their $2.2 million. Okay, the interest on the QSCABs is reimbursed from the federal government. At the time that we did the borrowing on that, they were reimbursing the interest at 100%, and now they're reimbursing around 93%.
Okay.
So we're still getting the
So
major
it's
portion
just
of
the
it.
interest that we get back from the federal government.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we got something back from them.
And
I was hoping it was the principal.
the other difference is that You aren't actually paying bonds off with this. This is a sinking fund. Pam, you want to explain that?
With the sinking fund, we actually set up, we have been restricting these funds within the main general fund account. And this year, we are setting up a separate fund just to hold these funds. So what happens is we do budget for the $1,071,000 because we want to make sure that we have the funds there. But it's actually a cash transfer. It's a transfer out of our main cash account into a sinking fund that is like works like a balloon payment after 14 years. So what we do is we take that $1,071,000, we put it over there in an escrow account, and it accumulates, and then we pay out the total principal amount at the end of those years.
Okay.
But it remains on our books as cash and restricted cash.
Yeah. And the main purpose of telling you that is as you see that fund grow, we can't touch that because at the end of that 14 years, there's a large amount of money needs to be sitting in there to make this payment. Okay. All right.
And it's also earning interest.
Not much.
It's earning more than our others.
And the federal government promised they would do 100% reimbursement of interest that we were paying.
Well, but they kind of backed up on that, didn't they?
Yes.
Davenport actually warned us of that when we went out for the Q-Scabs.
Really?
And they said that it's not totally guaranteed because they can change their mind.
They also had a different bond, and I forgot what that was called, but it was a bond.
Zabs, yeah,
Pardon me?
Q-Zabs.
Yeah, and what they were gonna do there was the federal government would guarantee certain payment, and, I didn't recommend we do that because of just what you're saying, is you're counting on the federal government over a 20-year period to give you that credit, and I would never count on the federal government over 20 years to do anything, particularly with money.
And if I could prevail, before you get into that, two questions that I have. First question is, where in here was the Chamber of Commerce?
Okay.
Our dues on the Chamber of Commerce? I mean, I've got a tab here, 4111 dues.
That's for us on other things, that's not it.
Okay.
It's on, it's you got Board of Commissioners, then dues, and Chamber of Commerce. Right behind you is your next tab. It says Chamber of Commerce.
Oh, there's the
4112.
Chamber of Commerce, right there, excuse me. Okay, I'm sorry.
So basically, you're giving them 20,500,
So it's got a separate tab, okay?
Pam, refresh my memory, one of those is dues and the other is,
Where we participate in those quarterly programs.
right,
I think it's $1,250 a quarter.
right, so that's the 5,000.
Yes, sir.
15,000 is our membership. Okay, all right.
And the additional question, and let's not get into a long discussion on this, is where would I find community and schools?
I'll let them find it. It's there.
It's there.
I can't remember.
Well, and let's go ahead and discuss that just a bit while she's looking at it.
Okay.
My understanding is that this is a benefit for our school and keeping kids in school. And it's a great program.
Right.
And I think we wanted to go ahead and try to incorporate that in the budget for the schools.
Right.
But we ran into difficulties in doing that because of some regulations and so forth.
Right. We had that discussion with communities and schools. They said they had no problem doing that as long as it was specifically earmarked in your budget that it had to be appropriated to them by the schools, which we would have done.
Right.
We talked to the school system, they didn't really have a problem with it, but their concern is that any appropriation to them for for operating expenses, not capital, operating expenses has to be shared with charter schools, because charter schools are public schools in North Carolina, and the money's split based on the number of kids. So their argument was that they would prefer not to do it because then they'd have to share, that's $130,000 And actually, they'd have to take some off the top and give it to charter schools.
So in this case, in this nonprofit, it's really best for us to keep it where it's at
And make a direct appropriation.
and make a direct.
And that's what we did. But we did, y'all had talked to me about that. We did, look into it. We tried to do it.
Well, it's a direct benefit to the education, to the school
That's right.
system, and so therefore we were trying to get it off our books onto theirs, but
Right.
it just, for whatever reason, just could not be worked out.
Right.
Yes, sir, it's behind tab 5800 is one of your white tabs at the general, and it's called Human Services.
Okay,
And it is, the third line from the bottom, it's called Project Graduation and Through Communities and Schools. It's $130,000. As Mr. Woods stated, we had moved it, before we actually met with them, back to the schools, and before we completed the manager's column, we moved it back to 110 where we had it originally.
All right, before we leave it, I'm gonna bring one up. The pregnancy center, where is it at?
Pam, now that is a revenue.
Yeah,
We charge them a
That's
certain amount
rent.
of rent, I think is what you're talking about, Wayne. Can you show in the revenues, the general fund, where that's coming in?
yes, sir.
is that under human services too?
No,
It'll
that
be
would
under
be.
your revenues.
It would be under general
Oh,
fund
okay,
revenue.
under revenue.
So if you go to the detailed revenue sheets, but I'll let Pam and Janice zero in on that. They know all the numbers. I do them by title, they do them by account numbers. It's amazing.
Okay, it's under the tab that says General Fund, 110.
Okay,
And then you're gonna have to look at your account numbers on the left side, and they're, in numerical order, so you'll go to 110 and go to 3834. It will be 3834.
wait a minute, the numbers is on,
Yep.
which side?
One, on your
On
left
the left
side,
side is the
there are
account
account numbers
number.
in their numerical order. 110, 3834.
Where is your?
Right, general fund's right here.
We'll go there, or go beyond it. Yeah, flip on back. Okay, here comes help. And you're saying it's 3,800?
110, 38, 34, 860, 015.
See, that's all our rents.
Okay, I see it.
We have them in categories, actually, within the, chart of accounts.
Okay, I got revenue.
And if you're asking why we itemize those, that's a good way to keep up with whether we've been paid that specific rent or not. But which one is it, Janice?
It's
Oh, yeah,
015.
15. 015
And
is
it's
Wayne Craig's.
$1,400 a month.
There it
They
is.
pay us on a monthly basis.
So that's 16,800. So the question is, do y'all wanna,
I think we're
Making a
charging them
change.
too much.
I wanna, yep, I think we all agree, we wanna reduce that.
Okay.
What, 12,000 a month?
1,200 a month.
1,200 a month? Where were we at?
whatever y'all
14?
wanna do.
We're at
We're
14?
at 16,800 annually.
Yeah, what's it a month?
That's $1,400 a month.
Okay, we've gone 12, is that what we're talking about?
Is that what you're gonna talk about?
Yeah, that's what, yeah, I want to reduce, I would like to see it reduced.
Okay.
You know, that's up to the board on what figure
Yeah.
we use.
Well, what number would y'all like to
What,
put
what
in?
number would you like?
I'd like to see it at least at 12,
12?
or even lower.
Now, are you saying a month or annually? You want
A
12,000
month, a
annually?
month.
No,
A
1,200 a
month.
month.
All right, that's 14,400 then annually. Isn't
That's
that right?
Yep.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
can we just agree on that, or
I-
do you need a motion, or?
I would just say that, Pam, if you'll make a note,
Yes,
what
sir.
we're gonna do is, as we go through the work session, like we did last year, as you guys make changes, we'll keep a running tally on it. So that's the first one, and we got it down.
Okay, all right,
All right. I wanna be clear, that's 14,400 for the year.
yes.
Is what you're gonna do, okay. All right.
Is y'all in agreement?
Yes.
Yep.
Anything else?
Nope.
All right, we'll go to the CIP then.
Now, am I understanding that our next work session, we can have our recommendation in regards to possible changes.
Yeah, that's when you should do it, on June 2nd.
June 2nd? You're gonna give me 4 days to go through this? You had 4 months.
Well, we could have done it sooner.
I just took care of mine.
You just took care of yours, though.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, Joe, how many you gonna have?
I don't know.
Depends on how much reading it is.
I'm telling you, I'm telling you.
I'm gonna be at the beach this weekend, I'll read.
Well, all kidding aside, before the meeting too, I mean, if y'all have questions, don't hesitate to call me.
Sure.
Or email us.
Or email us or whatever, but I'd prefer a call so we can discuss anything you bring up. This is somewhat new. Y'all have been getting a CIP book in the past, but let me go through this one. The table of contents is very straightforward. I've got a manager's message behind tab 1. Tab 2 is the guts of it, and that's a summary of projects by fiscal year. And tab 3 on down through 30 in alphabetical order is the various departments or divisions of the county. So if you want to see and what those are is those are detailed sheets that the department head submitted. Now, they may have a request for a project in fiscal year 16, I may have put it in 18. Because, as y'all can imagine, everybody wants their project done this year, or no later than the second year, and we don't have the money for all that, so part of this is setting the priorities for that. So if we'll turn to tab 1, just want to go through this briefly with you. This is a 5-year capital improvements plan covering fiscal year 16 through 20. The document plans the major capital projects and equipment that the county needs and can afford. Please note that this document does not include costs for renovation or construction needed for the DSS department and the public health department. Neither project is at a design stage where realistic cost estimates can be made. It also does not include funding for renovation/construction of adult and juvenile probation offices. All of these are needed improvements, but again, we are not far enough into the planning to determine a realistic cost. The Facilities Committee is working on a master facilities plan, which is one of your goals for 2015. All 4 of these needs will be addressed in that plan. The projects are listed in alphabetical order by department. The project sheets are also in alphabetical order behind the summary of projects by fiscal year. You will see sometimes the difference between when department heads wanted a project and when I've recommended it. That is usually due to their wanting it sooner than the county's budget will allow. You will note under the revenue section that some financing comes from the various departments. Most of the funding comes from the general fund, which contains most of the departmental budgets. In addition, there is a grant section, the Eastern Region funds, and a separate section on financing the Wayne Regional Agricultural and Convention Center. Please note at the bottom of the last page that there are 3 colors used to identify proposed debt issuances. Yellow is used for any 2/3 capacity general obligation bonds. And I'm going to come back to that and tell you what that is. Okay. Blue is used for any certificates of participation. And green is used for any installment purchase contracts. Now, we've used certificates of participation. That's what we did on the school, the 2 new schools. And we use installment purchase contracts on equipment that go for less than 59 months. There are 2 debt financings that could take place in fiscal year 2016. The first is $2 million of COPS for the Agricultural and Convention Center. And if you remember, if we get the hotel motel tax, that's going to finance that $2 million. However, it's more likely that this will be issued in fiscal year 2017. The second is $1,776,032 of a 59-month term installment purchase contract financing sheriff's office vehicles and equipment, including body cameras, EMS ambulances, and cardiac monitors. The required debt service payments for this installment purchase contract are included in the budget. So we show the expenditures, but we also show the debt coming in, the proceeds from the debt coming in to pay for that. then we have to show that we've got the first of 5 years of payments on it. The first year of this plan is fiscal year 2016. The projects shown for this fiscal year are all included in the fiscal year 2016 budget. The other 4 years are a plan showing the timing of proposed projects and equipment and the revenue sources to finance them. This is a realistic plan that Wayne County can afford over the next 5 years. Note that the only additional debt is in fiscal year 2016. Of course, we need to keep in mind that during this coming year, we will develop realistic costs for the 4 facilities mentioned above. So next year's CIP, and this plan will be redone every year, we'll need to take those costs into account. Most likely, they will be debt financed over a 20-year period, which will reduce the impact on the operating budget. Note that in fiscal year 2020, the debt service will have declined by over $2 million annually. That will free up money to help offset these added expenses. And that's what we just discussed a minute ago on the debt service schedules. Note that there is no spike in debt service payments. In addition, except for fiscal year 2017, the amounts needed from the general fund remain relatively stable. Some fund balance could be used to take the spike out of fiscal year 2017. Now let me go over this briefly with you and go through those comments. If you turn to tab 2, this is really the guts of the plan. What you've got here in alphabetical order going down the left side is all the projects. So you group everything that animal control is asking for is together. So you can see what a department wants for the whole 5-year period, okay? The project number is the account number that it would go under in the budget. Then we have a brief description. Again, if you want more details, you would go to the tab that covers animal control. In this case, that would be, I think, tab 3, and then you would see what they're requesting and some further information. So then it comes down to what fiscal year have we placed it in. So is everybody following how that's laid out? All right. So you go down through the list. As you can see in the far right, there are some things that department heads have asked for that I didn't fund. And one of those was EMT Wayne Net. They asked for new ambulances, and I continued the policy that Joe told you about, which is they would get the used ones coming out of EMS. So when I didn't fund a project, it just says that there's nothing in any of the 5 fiscal years, and then we have a totals column that says not funded. Is everybody following that? Okay. So you go through the various departments, you'll see a few more not fundeds in there. Then you get to the total proposed project expenditures. Now you'll notice that fiscal year 16 is elevated compared to the other years. Primary reasons for that are 2. One is we have $16 million in there for the agricultural center. Then you have $6.7 million in there for the 911 center. And if you add those together, that's almost $23 million of the $27 million is those 2 projects. Is everybody following that? Then if you look at the others, it's 3.8 million, 3.2, 3.1, 2.5 in the other years. What I do then is I give you what the current debt is. And the current debt will require 2.1 million this year, 2.050, 1,000,008, 1,000,007. Then we have the proposed long-term debt service. That's the 1.7 million that we're going to borrow. That's 384, 377. So then you get a total of proposed debt service, and you'll see that this year it would go to almost 2.5 million, but 4 years later, it's at 361,000. So that's the 2 million we free up that I was talking about earlier. Is everybody following that? So the way we would structure our debt service on these other projects we're looking at would be to try not to have very much of a payment the first 2 or 3 years, and then start it in the back when you free up all this money. That's the total expenditures. Then we get into the revenues. You'll notice that I've bolded the general fund because usually that's where the bulk of your money comes from.
I have a question.
Yes,
Could I, on the expenditures,
yeah,
I think you and I talked the other day, being on the jet, let's, for example, the jet port.
Right.
We were talking about the, we've taken off of the CIP, the Northern Central Library, which has been on for quite a few years, but, and you mentioned to me that there hasn't been any estimates or anything done. Well,
right.
you look at the Wayne Jetport, the perimeter fencing and the airport master plan hangar, those are just estimates also from people that's sitting on the board.
Mhm.
When I was on there, this was just an estimate. My question is, can we not do the same thing and incorporate a Northern Library into this 5-year plan? And I know that this is not going to happen probably within 5 years, but somehow or other, we need to get the process started in order to get some fundraising from the Friends of the Northern Library to get something started. So
You can do it either way. The approach I've taken here is if I didn't have firm numbers on buildings, I didn't do them. And I guess I was operating on the theory that the facilities committee would go through, do the analysis, and then as we got a firm number, we would redo this, because we'll be updating this plan every year.
Okay.
Now, as far as the airport, if you want to delete some of those because we don't have firm numbers, we can do that, because they're out in farther years anyway.
Am I right, Joe?
Yeah, these numbers are based off TIPS estimations.
Right. And Joe, Ray, the reason that I wasn't overly concerned about that is, as we go through the revenues, you're gonna see every one of those has a 90% grant coming in to cover them. So we're only, like that, where was the fence? $775,000. It's only $77,500 impact on us, because it's 1/10.
Okay, so my other question in relation to that is that over the next 5 years in this CIP plan, how flexible is this plan?
Very flexible.
Well, you can adjust it every year.
Okay.
In other words, the first year, what y'all really need to concentrate on for this year is, do you agree with the priorities I've put in 16? Because 16 is in the budget.
Right.
And so if you say to me, George, I don't want to do this project this year, I want to do it next year, and I'd rather substitute one you've got in 17 or whatever, we can do that. This is a spreadsheet, we can move it around. This is just my recommendation to you on what I see the priority order being, but you can change those. The critical thing for you to do is look at 16, because that is what we're talking about funding this year. Now, talking about whether something ought to be in 18 or 19, I don't know that I would spend a great deal of time on that, because we'll amend this thing 2 more years before that becomes critical.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I got it.
It does, and I had some of the same concerns, and that is for the health department.
Yeah.
With the Will Sullivan Building, we know
Right.
we've got to do something there,
Right.
and it's not here, but we don't have estimates on the
Well,
cost of it.
and I'll be honest, I've been through this a number of times. The problem is, if you put a number, then somewhere down the road, people think we can build it for that.
Yeah.
And if we haven't had an architect involved and we really know, I don't want to say it's 2.5 million, the next thing is 4 million, because then somebody's going to look at me and say, how did this get from 2.5 to $4 million?
Yeah.
Well, the 2.5 was just a plug. So I'd rather not plug those numbers. What I have given you is the explanation that 4 years out, we're going to free up $2 million
Right.
from debt service, which will debt finance a lot of stuff.
Well,
Okay.
on the other side of that as well, I want to make sure that just because we have in here in fiscal year 2018, the replacement of deputy patrol cars.
Right.
If in fact they do not need to be
Then we won't.
replaced, we're not going to do it.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. This is a
So
plan.
just, it's a plan.
This is a
a
plan.
budget.
Right.
And again, we will be updating this annually. So it's but what, the benefit of the planning though is to look big picture and long-term, what all are we facing? And I agree, Ray, we don't have the library on. I probably should have had a sentence in there about that as well, but basically, you got 5, if you add it, you got 5 projects that you know about. Now, of course, the issue on the library is, we don't know what they're gonna agree to yet, and we gotta get that done. So I would say, once they determine that they can come up with a suitable joint site, then we can start looking at, let's incorporate a figure, bring an architect in, look at what we're doing, and then we get a cost figure, and then we move from there.
I'm putting my vote in 2020 for that 2 million that's freed up.
Okay, so let me go back. We've talked about the expenditures. Let me go back and go over the revenues a little bit more with you. We didn't get through all of that. So you have revenues that are generated from the various funds. Because remember, this CIP covers all of your funds. You know, it cuts across funds. So let's just go through this. We have $1,020,000 coming from the general fund. Then you have, the following year, you have $2,383,000. And if you remember, my comments to you were, the transfer from the general fund stays relatively constant, except in 2017. So if we do the things that are programmed in 2017, we may have to use some fund balance to cut that spike out. Or we say we can defer some of those into 18. But that's not, looking at this plan, that's not a huge problem, you know, on a budget your size. The budgeted from fleet management, we've got that money coming in. Budgeted from emergency telephone system fund, you'll see the $6,738,000. That's the grant that we're planning on getting, and that offsets completely the building. Because that's our plan, that's what we put in for. Budgeted from emergency medical fund, you have those monies coming in to cover capital outlay.
Nope, let me back up here.
All right.
Where did we come up with $6.7 million for the 911 building? Why in the world would it be that expensive?
Well, we don't think necessarily it will be, but remember the Mission Critical, they did the report. We had them assist us in going after the grant.
Estimation from the Mission Critical,
Is where
Just
we
an
got that.
estimation.
just for grant purposes.
Well, I could build about 3 buildings
Well-
for that. I mean, that's,
Well, but remember, we're going after the grant, let's see what they give us, and then we'll,
Revise the quote.
I don't know how to do that better than I. Go ahead.
well, I think the critical issue there is, the assumption here is there's no county money.
Well, agreed, but my gosh,
I
boy, you got swimming pools out there or what?
Not unless we buy bad land.
No, we wouldn't do anything like that.
Okay.
Emergency medical, so you've got that, emergency medical fund, the sewer fund, DSS, and then the solid waste fund, you'll see those are big numbers, but remember, that equipment's very expensive. And you're constantly replacing that equipment, and as y'all can imagine, that operates in probably the worst environment we've got out there at the landfill. And then we're budgeted from the airport fund. These are essentially the matches coming in for those. That's the 10% matches for the 90% grants, okay? You go to the next page and we talk about grants. And you'll see that depending on what year I put a particular project that's out of the airport, that's Federal Aviation Administration money through the North Carolina Division of Aviation. These are the grant amounts coming in. So just to match that up, if you go to the prior page, you'll see like in 17, we've got 41.5. That's the matches on the 67.5 and the 306. Okay.
So you go through all of that. Then we have $341,295 of Eastern Region funding that was allocated to the airport. That's not the money that's being repaid. That was part of the grant money, the distribution money. So that money's there, and we're showing is using that for some projects in 16. Then the Agricultural and Convention Center is big enough. I wanted to break that out separately. So this is an estimation of where right now we think everything would be. It'd be $4 million you've already set aside. We can take $1.1 million of the Eastern Region loan pool that has not been expended and redirect that over to the Eastern Region loan pool. The North Carolina General Assembly appropriation, we're hoping for $2 million out of there. The COPS funded by the hotel motel tax, that's the $2 million we're talking about borrowing. Everybody see that? And that's why that's in blue ink. U.S. Department of Agriculture, a 10-year interest-free loan for $2 million. They run those through the EMCs, and that's the one we've had a meeting with Tri-County, and they're working with us on that. In addition, the USDA will give you grants, and we can get that up to $600,000. If they do the loans, they'll also do the grants. Isn't that right, Bill?
That's correct.
Okay. The private donor campaign, I have an estimate of about $2 million in there. The federal budget appropriation, we're hoping for about $1 million there. And then what we don't get will be made up as a transfer from the county capital reserve fund of $1.3 million. And that money, that's not the general fund, that's money, that's that telephone franchise money. You remember we set aside in the capital reserve fund? And so that's where we would use that. Now, obviously, if the state came along and did the bond at the state level they're talking about, and if some of that money went to the Ag Center, then, we would redirect how we come out here. That would certainly be helpful. But this is a way to get it done. This is how we're hoping the thing shakes out right now, okay? And, don't hold me to the exact numbers, because some may go up, some may go down. But that's an estimation of how, that's kind of a roadmap of how we can get there, okay? I said I would give you a definition of 2/3 capacity general obligation bonds. First of all, we don't have any. To my knowledge, I don't think you have any general obligation bonds outstanding because you've issued COPS. But let me explain how this works. If you had issued $10 million of general obligation bonds, under North Carolina law, you would have had to have had a referendum on that. Okay, to issue general obligation bonds, you have to have a referendum of the people. Okay, if you were paying off that over 20 years, equal principal payments, that'd be $500,000 a year. The way this works is that in any given year, if you don't issue more GO bonds that year and you paid off $500,000 the previous year, then you can issue 2/3 of that amount you paid off, or you're going to pay off that year, without going back for another vote. So you could issue another 300 and, I can't do the math, Pam, what is it, 367,000, something like that, without a vote. That's what a 2/3 bond is. It doesn't apply to us.
But do you have to classify that as a 2/3 bond when you put it on the ballot?
Well, it doesn't go on the ballot. It doesn't go on the ballot. You are authorized under statute that if you pay off whatever amount you pay off net, because if you issue, there are cities and counties in this state that issue some debt every year while they're paying off more, so it's the net. Like if you're in Charlotte, they might pay off $5 million and issue $7 million. Well, in that case, they can't issue any 2/3 bonds.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
But you, first of all, had to get a bond passed by vote.
The vote. The vote of the
So
people.
you do that for $100 million.
Right.
and you pay off 10 million, and then they'll allow you to go back and borrow
6.7 million without a
So
vote.
you really never pay it off, or you don't have to pay it off, you just keep borrowing it.
Well, that's why the public
Well,
should
it's
be very
2/3.
careful about what they approve. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, I wanted y'all to be aware of that. That's in the statute, but for Wayne County, it doesn't apply.
Well, let me go further, that $100 million, you just paid it all for 7, 10 years or whatever, and you paid off 50 million, then you go back and borrow
No,
2/3 of
I'm
50.
glad you brought that up. It's use it or lose it. If you pay off 10 million the first year, you either issue the up to 6.7 or that's it.
In other words, it's gone then.
You can't aggregate it. You were talking about accumulating
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
You can't do that.
Can't do that.
No. So,
Well, it's almost to people's benefit to go ahead and borrow the money. I mean, God.
well,
Yeah, but you can get in debt trouble. like-
Well, I see where you could get
Yeah,
in
you
trouble,
could.
because
You could.
you're only paying off a third.
but I wanted y'all to be aware of that because you may see where some, other jurisdictions are doing. If you hear a 2/3 general obligation bond, that's what that is.
Okay.
You can't borrow yourself out of it.
No, you can't. And again, one of the things y'all said it earlier, one of the things I would compliment Wayne County on is you have a very low debt structure. So the way this county's been financed over the years has been very conservative. And it pays dividends because we're not paying that much out in debt service. That's basically how the CIP will work. Again, as you're reading it and going over it, the key in my mind is, look at all of the projects, because I may have something in 17 or 18 that you think should be in 16. But the only thing I would say is that the revenues are limited, so if you want to fund something that's in 17 or 18, we need to figure out what do you want to take out in 16,
Find the money.
Got to find the money. But this is our estimation of where we think the priorities ought to be, but, the budget's about your priorities. So if you want to change it, that's fine.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
could I go back for a minute and ask, you had mentioned something on the cover page.
Yeah.
Do you think is it too much trouble to include in that cover page the possibility of the Northern Library?
Well, yeah, I can add it to that it doesn't cover it, like I did those
I
four.
understand, but just
Yeah.
mention it in your.
Sure.
in your cover.
Pam, will you make a note of that? And we'll amend that letter.
Okay, thank
All
you,
right.
thank you.
Anything else, anybody?
What kind of mention are we having to the Northern Library? We're not agreeing at this point that we're
No,
building.
all I'm
a-
gonna add is a sentence that says, I've said that 4 things are not in it, now I'm gonna say 5 things aren't in it.
That's
Okay.
all, that's all. If the pipe was going to agree to put it in pipe, when Fremont going to agree to put it in Fremont.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're gonna have two.
They always
have
have.
two libraries? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Well, that's the budget and the capital improvements program. And that's pretty much everything I was gonna go over with you today, but I'm happy to answer any questions now. We're scheduled for, the public hearing will be on the 6th the 2nd, at 9 a.m. or 9:15. As part of your regular meeting. And then immediately following that meeting, we're gonna come back and hold our first work session on this. And so, as you read through it, if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to call me about it. And if I can't answer it, I'll ask Pam.
Does that include Sunday?
Yeah.
A few quick questions here. The equipment, voting equipment that the Board of Elections has
Right.
requested, and I see where you are moving that out to 17. Why are we replacing the equipment we currently have?
It's about 7 or 8 years old, and they would like to see it replaced. When we talked to Rosemary before she left, she felt like we could move it. Our thinking on it, that we could move it out a few more years.
A few more years.
Well, like 1 or 2. And what we looked at, in fact, she brought it up, and I agree with her, is I don't think that a year when you're gonna have 4, maybe 5 elections is the time to put in new electronic stuff, because we all know how computers are. And so my personal opinion is, and then she came along and resigned, you know, so my feeling was, now we got 5 elections and a new guy. So my feeling was, if it can go another year or two, this is not the time to replace it. Now, she did give me an email later and said the board would like me to reconsider the fact that, you know, because I did recommend we cut it. So I did want you to know the Board of Elections would like to see it end this year, but I still don't recommend that.
Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Wood?
I got one comment. Just test the board here, asking Mr. Wood. I'm trying to do this by memory. Earlier conversations about literacy connections, about the contract between Wayne County and that organization, and to go on further about U.S. citizenship. Would it be inappropriate to add in there as Wayne County resident as well?
I think it'd be very appropriate, because,
You know,
I'm sorry.
We're, inside the contract, Mr. Wood's talking about requiring for U.S. citizenship and to track that, and we have benchmarks to evaluate literacy connections. And I was just asking, would it be appropriate also to ask for it to be Wayne County citizens as well?
so really,
I agree.
because what we're saying is, you gotta be a U.S. citizen, or you've got to have legal papers like a work documents or a student visa or whatever. So it's either you're a U.S. citizen or you have documentation that you're legal here. And then what Joe's saying is, and let's add that you have to reside in Wayne County. Because he brings up, I mean, that's a valid point to me. Why would we spend Wayne County money on somebody that lives in Lenore County? That's just
I would agree with that.
Just thought.
Have you spelled out in that contract how she's supposed to do that? Would he verify
we had a discussion on that. I haven't written a contract yet. I wanted to come to you first and see what you wanted to do, and then we'll get with Borden and draft up something.
I mean, you need some sort of visual
Process.
that's reliable process.
Right. Well, if you notice, when I wrote up, I said they'll need to come up with a procedure for doing that verifies it and that's suitable to us, and they'll have to give us a report monthly. Because what I don't want is, we don't know anything about it for a year, and they come up at the end of the year and we find out they haven't been tracking it. I want to know month by month if they're tracking it.
So they'll report directly to you?
Yes. So, Pam, did you capture that? We want to definitely put that into the contract. That was the consensus I was hearing.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
And again, just make sure I'm understanding. So on the 2nd, we're gonna have our commissioners meeting, and we're gonna have the public hearing. That afternoon, we're gonna go back into budget work session.
That's correct.
Okay.
So you will have had the benefit of everything the public says, and you will have had 4 or 5 days to digest all of this, and then,
5 months to give us 5 days. Isn't that nice?
well, remember,
We're busy tomorrow too.
but now remember, you can have as many work sessions as you want, and we can have them up through June 15th. So if y'all wanna wait, all kidding aside, if you want more time after that, you want a second one, and you wanna say, let's wait a week, I need more time to go through it, you can certainly do that. You can hold them right up to the time of the 16th when you vote on it. And if you need to, you can delay that. This thing only has to be voted on to where it's effective July 1. So actually, you've got a month to review it and go over it, if that's what it takes.
I just wanted to go back for a second on the literacy. When we had discussion earlier today, I didn't mean to give the impression that I'm against this. What I'm saying is that at some point in time, I don't know, we can do this for Wayne County, but I'm not sure how many years it's going to actually apply, because at some point in time, every illegal in this country is going to have a way to go to citizenship. And when that happens, then this rule and contract that we have is going to be null and void. Even though no illegal here in this country, I do not believe, will ever be forced to go back to their home country if they are here, and if they are illegal. I think there's gonna be a way, no matter who's in control of the Congress, whether conservatives or not, I think that there's gonna be a way for citizens illegal that are here to become citizens. So therefore, in years to come, it may be a year, it may be 5 years. What we're doing today is probably not gonna be, having an effect.
Well, sure it will.
How's that?
Because even if they grant citizenship to those individuals that are here, it will prevent future individuals that are flooding into the country that we provide those services to non-citizens. So if you become a citizen, you're paying your taxes, then fine, that's great. The problem is that there are too many people that are riding the wagon and not pulling the wagon. That's the problem.
Well,
So,
what you're saying though is that you're thinking that even a conservative Congress, for example, is not going to address the immigration problem we have coming across the border.
I didn't say that.
Well, I'm assuming that they're gonna do that. That's what I'm saying. I'm assuming
Somebody's gonna have to.
that somebody's gonna have to address the immigration issue coming across our borders.
Yeah. Well, to me, the issue is, do you think you should be taxing your citizens to provide services to people who aren't supposed to be here?
That's a good point.
I'm gonna be the bad guy today. At some point, we may have to just quit funding it.
Is that in the form of a motion? Did I get you on that one?
Well, just to add something that may be on the other side of the ledger. The people who are benefiting from the literacy and teaching folk who are the different languages to speak it and write it are the people who are hiring them to work. So you can, we can take the high road and talk about illegals not benefiting from a service that we're providing, but they wouldn't be here if it wasn't that the companies that hired them, the farmers and everybody else, asking them to work and having them work. And now, what you're actually doing is you're guaranteeing that when a person puts a certain amount of fertilizer in one of those machines, he can read it and know that he's putting the right amount in. I can remember a time when there was a great push that limit who could work as a custodian in a school because of putting wrong chemicals on the floor or on something else and poisoning somebody. So if you want to take the chance that the products that you're eating is not getting the right amount of fertilizer and poisons in them, and you rather gamble that versus letting folk learn how to read, write, and understand how to do their jobs. But they wouldn't be here if folk didn't need them to work. So just as we think about those things, keep that in mind. And I'm not trying to tell you this afternoon not to put any regulation in you won't. But just remember why the folk that we're talking about are here and how they got here. There wasn't jobs over here that was promoted by the people that's got the big companies. They wouldn't be here, they'd still be in Mexico. They didn't bring themselves over here, they were lured over here for a good job. And so keep that in mind. Don't punish the people who will come because they want to work. And then you're adding a level of danger to a person not knowing how to read.
Well, Mr. Camardi, what you're saying is right, but if I go to Mexico to get a job, are they gonna teach me how to speak Spanish?
If they needed you to do that job, if they needed you to operate a piece of equipment, if they needed you to, if you were driving a truck in Mexico and you didn't know how to read Spanish and it was important enough for you to get that load from Texas down to Mexico City, I guarantee you somebody would make provisions for you to be able to do that. I'll just say this to you. On my smartphone, I have a translation so that I can translate English into Creole. That's a benefit for me. That's all I'll say. At some point, you try to fix things so that you can communicate. And that's what we're talking about. And I'm not talking about adding more funding to the literacy. I'm not talking about if you guys want to cut it. I'll put the stipulation in there. But I can guarantee you that the folk who who needs that service, if you're talking about the folk who are bilingual or not bilingual, but don't speak a foreign language, then you're talking about people who need that to be able to work, and the folk who are hiring are people who are your friends and neighbors and church members.
Mr. Mayor.
Last thing
Get
real
out of here
quick.
before we go and get in trouble.
No, this is a pertinent question. The city also funds literacy. I'm wondering how the city might feel about maybe coordinating with us. I wonder if they feel the same way we do. So both funding, the city and the county would be on the same page on this?
If my memory serves me correctly, the city cut what they were funding from 40,000 to 20,000.
I understand, but that's 20,000 that they are still considered a funding arm of literacy. And I'm just wondering if any of y'all, Mr. Wood, do you know how they would feel about something like that?
I don't.
Okay. I mean, we can do what
Are
we
you
want
talking
to as
about,
a
if
county.
they, are you saying that they might have an identical contract, terms, is that what you're talking about?
Or do they feel the same way about,
I have no idea.
being
I've not-
citizens?
I've had no discussion with the
Okay.
city manager on that.
Okay, all right, I was just wondering if there was, because you got two funding arms to the same
Yeah.
group, and, you know, are they gonna be pulled one way or the other, you know? If we mandate, the city says, well, what you're doing is you're picking up part of who we're supporting in our funding, so it could be a problem, is what I'm saying. I'm just asking if the city of Goldsboro has any preference to this.
We're right now, probably the proper thing to do now is just to change it, is to put in the budget the wording that you come up with, Mr. Gurley put up with, and we're funding it this year, and just move forward, and, you know, we can talk about this later, but, you know, I'm not saying change anything now.
Yeah.
But, you know, we move forward with what we're funding it now, and put the wording in like you and Mr. Gurley have recommended, and we just move forward with it.
Okay. So
Anyone else?
So Pam, you got what Joe wanted to add? Okay.
Make a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Have a motion on the floor, we adjourn. All in favor, show sign of right hand.
So we don't need to carry anything except the CIP plan, is that right?